It's 1962 in the dead of winter in Antarctica, and a fierce snowstorm rages outside one of the Soviet Union's most remote research bases. The wind howls through the icy corridors and the cold seeps into every corner of the small facility. A team of scientists and researchers are entering the polar night, each of them acutely aware of the harsh reality of life on this frozen continent. But none of them could have prepared for what was about to happen. In the midst of this frozen wasteland, one of the men would challenge everything he thought he knew about survival. This is the story of Leonid Rogozov, a doctor on the edge of the world who is faced with a medical crisis with no hope of rescue. The Soviet Antarctic station Novolovorevskaya was a remote outpost at the bottom of the world. It was a harsh and isolated environment with temperatures that could drop to -60 degrees Fahrenheit, strong winds that could reach over 60 miles an hour, and months of complete darkness during the winter. Despite the challenges, the station was temporarily home to a small team of scientists and researchers who were sent to build a new base in the region. Having recently completed their mission, and with the polar winter approaching daily, the crew planned to hunker down and spend the dark, cold winter at the base until they could leave in the spring. One of those researchers was Leonid Rogozov, a 27-year-old Soviet doctor who had been stationed at Novolovorevskaya months earlier. Rogozov was a skilled surgeon and physician, and hailing from the frozen tundra of Siberia, he was no stranger to harsh weather. Despite the isolation and the extreme conditions, Rogozov was passionate about his work and embraced the challenges of life at the station. But one day in April 1961, he began to experience a sharp pain in his abdomen. At first, he thought it might just be a stomach bug, but the pain grew worse, and he knew that something was seriously wrong. As the pain in his abdomen grew worse, Leonid Rogozov realized that he was suffering from acute appendicitis. Being a doctor, he was certain. He knew that he needed to undergo surgery as soon as possible, but there was no way to evacuate him from the remote Antarctic base, and he was the only doctor in the team of 13. Rogozov was faced with a stark choice: either wait for the symptoms to subside and risk a potentially fatal rupture of his appendix, or remove the organ himself. He didn't know if that was humanly possible. However, he made the decision to perform the surgery. "I did not sleep at all last night. It hurts like the devil, a snowstorm whipping through my soul, wailing like 100 jackals," he wrote in his diary. He wrote frequently in his diary, noting his experiments at the station. This time was no different. He informed his colleagues of his plan. At first, they were shocked and apprehensive, but they knew there was no other option. He began laying out his meticulous plan. He handed out assignments to each of his colleagues, making sure they knew exactly what was expected of them. 2 would act as his main assistants, handing him instruments, adjusting the light, and holding a mirror. He planned to use the reflection to see what he was doing. The assistants had backups in case they fainted. In case he fainted, he also had a plan. He instructed his team to inject him with adrenaline and taught them how to breathe for him in case he lost consciousness mid-surgery. Rogozov knew that general anesthesia was out of the question. He would be able to use a local anesthetic for the surgical area, but his success depended on him keeping his head as clear as possible. At 2 a.m. on May 1st, with the makeshift operating table set up and local anesthesia administered, Leonid Rogozov began the delicate and dangerous process of removing his own appendix. Rogozov made a 4-inch incision in his lower abdomen. He continued cutting. While he started out using the mirror to help him see, he ended up finding it too difficult and instead turned to only his sense of touch with no gloves. Rogozov was born in 1934 in a remote village in eastern Siberia, and from an early age he showed an interest in medicine. He studied at the Leningrad Pediatric Medical Institute, where he excelled in his classes and showed a particular aptitude for surgery, in which he ended up specializing. After graduating, Rogozov worked as a surgeon in various hospitals and clinics in Russia, where he gained a reputation for his skill and dedication. In 1960, Rogozov was selected to join the Soviet Union's Antarctic expedition as a physician, where he would spend nearly 2 years keeping his team healthy and performing small studies at the base. He was certainly getting his data. He cut until he neared the infected appendix. While making progress, he accidentally made a cut in his intestines and had to stitch his mistake. After 30 to 40 minutes, though, he had to start taking breaks. He was growing weak. Vertigo struck. His hands felt like rubber. He wasn't sure if he would make it through. Finally, he clamped the appendix and carefully dissected the tissues around it, separating the inflamed organ from the surrounding structures. He noted the darkness around the base. He figured had he waited a day longer, he would have died. He flushed his abdomen with antibiotics and sutured himself up. The entire process took nearly 2 hours. With the surgery successfully completed, Leonid Rogozov's colleagues breathed a sigh of relief. But his body would still need time to heal, and they were in the middle of Antarctica with no access to additional medical care. Rogozov's colleagues worked to keep him comfortable, making sure he had plenty of rest and fluids, and carefully monitoring his vital signs. Within 5 days, his body temperature had returned to normal. After just 7 days, his stitches were removed, and in 2 weeks he was back to performing his normal work duties, awaiting the end of the brutal winter so they could be evacuated. He returned to Russia as a hero. However, whenever asked about the experience, his response was simply, "A job like any other, a life like any other." Thanks to his medical training, his colleagues' assistance, and his own determination, Leonid Rogozov had survived one of the most harrowing medical emergencies imaginable, performing surgery on himself in the middle of one of the harshest environments on Earth, living to tell the tale.